any place that CO2 exists is a place we're going to look at. So frankly, what looks better on your portfolio? A nice shiny EV or a cow? You know, like there is, we saw opportunity where other people saw boring investment. My encouragement is get educated, understand the geography you work in, the political landscape, and find the opportunities in your system.
Hi friends, welcome to Change Started, to our series Change Trails. In recent times, we would have seen a lot of money being put into the startup ecosystem. But if you would have seen closely, most of the money which is going in, most of the money which is being put by venture capitalists, angel investors, private equity players, they are not seeing the environmental impact of their investment. That is something amiss in the space as a whole. But we have a company called Snocap. Snocap is a new venture capital fund which is investing specifically in climate technology solutions. And we have its founder, Jonathan, with us to speak more about it. So thanks, Jonathan, for giving us this opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So why don't you start your journey before Snocap? What were you doing?
Yeah, great question. So, you know, the way of thinking about me is basically like a software person. I started my career in software and I went directly into Silicon Valley. I had no interest in going anywhere else. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. At least I thought I did early on. And you know, the first industry I went into was gaming, and I kind of didn't really think, or it didn't pan out to be what I wanted it to be, or what I thought it was going to be. So I kept switching industries. I was lucky in gaming. I went through an acquisition to Disney. So I worked there for a little, and then I went into real estate, went through another acquisition to Zillow, a big real estate software business here in the US. And after that, I tried to be a founder. You know, I did a fitness startup for a bit, a yoga startup, and then I also got involved in a sharing economy business where people tried to rent out their stuff to other people. So it's a bunch of different industry verticals, learning all the way and starting to grow myself as a sort of engineer, from an engineer to more of like a manager and engineering leader. And while I was seemingly having a fair amount of success in that world, certainly something wasn't right, something was missing. And it wouldn't be until 2015, 2016 that I kind of figured out what that was. Ironically enough, I figured it out by accident. I was going down the coast in California, and I stayed at a farm to basically get out of the city. And I was on that farm that I met who is now my business partner, Nate Salpeter. And I learned from him and his wife, Anna, that they were going to start a nonprofit specifically focused around sustainability, food systems, future of waste, agriculture, food, all that. And, you know, I'd never heard of anything like that, and I've never worked with anyone like that. So I offered my time as a volunteer, and after a few months, they asked me to join their board. And I didn't know it at the time, but that sort of decision would ultimately change the direction of my life forever. What ended up happening was I got more and more involved. We ended up creating really amazing, globally viral programs like the funnily named one, Goat to Meeting, which became a sort of global phenomenon, really put Sweet Farm on the map, and actually help the nonprofit expand. We are now a bi-coastal, a national nonprofit. We're based out of upstate New York near Cornell, also a great innovation hub. And then of course, our Bay Area location, which I don't think I need to say anything about innovation in the Bay Area. So, you know, that's been just a really lovely experience. Something I couldn't have predicted, though, already kind of in an unpredictable state, was that founders would get really excited about working with Sweet Farm. And really, it came down to the fact that as a nonprofit, we were really different. We wanted to do what was best for our climate, our economy, and technology. We didn't feel like we needed to sacrifice any of those concepts to create the change we wanted to see in the world. And so founders who were mission aligned with us started to get excited and called us up. And a lot of these businesses or founders were in stealth mode, and they just really, liked our network. They valued our feedback, our mentorship. And we were fortunate enough to be able to place some early checks in founders well before the market even predicted or understood the sort of value in future food. So that was like back in 2017, 2018. Of course, fast forward to today, and it's all over the news. People are getting really excited, and we're already starting to think about, what's next. So, it was through that process that Nate and I kind of looked at each other and said, why aren't we doing this full time? So I made a very strategic move to go work for a big equity management business called Carta. Loved that business, probably more than I anticipated I was going to like it, and learned all sorts of stuff about investing and investor services. I built, or my teams built, tools for capital calls, and quarterly reports, and all the various minutia involved in the industry. And after about a year and change, I decided, okay, no better time than the present. People are excited about what we're looking at. Let's do this. So Nate and I incorporated Snocap, which is the name of our first fund, and we went to market in August. So we're very excited. It's early days. Being an emerging manager is very similar to being a founder. You are a founder, but your product is a financial product, and it is, you go through a lot of the ups and downs of being a founder, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I actually really enjoy what we're doing now, and I'm excited to grow the business.
Fantastic. So from a Silicon Valley geek to somebody who went into an agricultural based startup by chance, then got interested into that, then you have started this Snocap. But tell me, what was the turning point in this journey which made you decide, yeah, this is something which I'm going to pick? Because maybe you could have picked another something around food, or something around agri-tech, or something around EV. So why this particular space?
Yeah, so I think of it more like a puzzle, right? Climate is a system. It's a complex system, and it has emerging properties that can't be understood from looking at its individual parts, right? That is the very definition of a complex system. And so the only way to really appreciate the opportunities in climate is to look at it as a system. So early on, when we were just dipping our feet into this world, well before the world was paying attention, back in, arguably the nonprofit was squarely focused around this, but really when we started to invest back in 2017, 2018, the opportunities that we were seeing, the things that were getting thrown away, were things, related to food and ag and waste. And where was all the money going? It was going to AI, it was going to mobility, it was going to EV. But, agriculture is a huge contributor to, as we know now, of course, with all the run up to COP26 and just, the climate being in the global gestalt, it is much more apparent to people the impact that agriculture has. So, back then we understood this, and we saw the opportunity that everyone was ignoring. Frankly, what looks better on your portfolio, a nice shiny EV or a cow? There is we saw opportunity where other people saw boring investment, and indeed, it became one of the most important sectors, and it's one of the most rapidly growing sectors, almost exponentially growing. So that was the first insight. But as we continued to work with these businesses, we gained new insights into what do they need to be successful. And it turns out their needs are universal. Coming from software, I have a bias to thinking about platforms. Like AWS, for instance, is a big software platform that allows engineers to go build new businesses and do it in a way that would be impossible if they had to run their own servers and do all this stuff themselves. So the same problem exists in climate and climate tech. You need a new foundation in order to build the businesses we all want as consumers. Without it, we're kind of stuck. We're stuck in this sort of everyone needs to vertically integrate and build their entire sort of kingdom in order to go to market. Indeed, when you look at like businesses like Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat, part of the reason they're so big and defensible is they built a huge kingdom, right? They vertically integrated their entire supply chain. And that's great. That's great for those businesses, but it's a huge disservice to every other plant-based manufacturer out there. And as we move into cellular agriculture and fermented proteins, things like that, these technologies are constantly being reinvented and recycled, and we need more and more of a supporting layer for businesses to be able to go out and go to market. Indeed, the changes we're looking for are not individual point-in-time consumer products. They are systemic change products, right? So that's to invest in that way involves a much deeper insight into the product and into the market itself.
Yeah, cool. Pretty much, I think the same. So before we get into your service area, where do you want to go? I wanted to ask, can you explain what is climate technology? Because in climate space, there are a lot of areas: agriculture, waste management, electric vehicles, renewable energies. There are so many sectors which are all related to climate, right? So if you see climate tech space, are you seeing everything under your purview, or is it something very specific you are picking on?
Yeah, so for Snocap, we're super interested in our sort of bread and butter industries, the food, ag, and waste, but we see new opportunities in infrastructure, so specifically materials. A lot of the problems our founders are running into, we actually see those problems in other industries as well, so we know that platform solutions can support both. We're also really interested in finance. It turns out that when you think about a platform layer for founders, it's not just do these technologies exist? It's does the right capital for my business exist? Does the right mechanisms to do accounting and traceability exist, right? If we're trying to say that we're going to make an impact in carbon, you have to be able to measure it, right? You can't solve what you can't measure. So there's a big need for that level of fidelity across the platform stack. And so we think finance is a huge opportunity. We think that infrastructure and food, ag, and waste all have opportunities as well. But we're really pushing down the stack to find those sort of strategic swap out, rip and replace type opportunities in the market.
So Jonathan, just a question. I wanted to ask you, can you explain to our audience what is climate technology? Just in layman terms, without putting too many jargons, is it everything which is solving climate change, or are there any specific areas do we need to look at?
Yeah, so the simplest way to think about climate tech is like a spectrum, okay? There is the first, maybe like a two-dimensional spectrum. On one side of the spectrum is impact, okay? There's immediate impact, like I can do something today that will have an impact on the climate. And then there's long-term impact, like I will be able to, invent a new type of protein that completely mitigates the need for animal agriculture, something like that, right? And then on the other spectrum is breadth. So problems can be very vertically oriented, like I want to go create plant sensors that allow us to detect how a specific crop is reacting to fertilizer and water and things like that. And then on a broad spectrum, I want to go create an individual protein molecule that has applicability in, dyes for fashion, but also food coloring and things like that, that removes the need for petroleum, right? Those are both example of climate tech, but one is incredibly broad in its applicability, and one is incredibly narrow. So I think, yes, to your point, all of these businesses are trying to remove the carbon intensity of existing processes, right, through innovation. So if you wanted a one-liner for climate tech, the one I use all the time is to lower our carbon footprint through innovation. That is climate tech. Now, whether that innovation is near term or long term, wide or narrow, is where you're going to see some differences in investment and in focus. We consider ourselves very long term, very broad. We want the biggest, most systemic changes at the platform layer.
Just to expand onto your point, I mean, everything, I believe, right? So even the finance, so the banks are putting in money into sectors which are not very appropriate. So that's where probably climate tech comes in and tells the users or the investors or the people like us who are putting in the money, where should they put, like ESG is one type of climate tech, if I'm not wrong, right? Sustainable finance, sustainable investments, renewable energy storage. So all these would come under the purview of climate technology. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, so ESG it's a tough one, because ESG is a term that was popularized before climate tech was really popularized, right? ESG is a kind of a philosophy, and it's being more and more codified over time with the SEC creating an individual task force to sort of monitor ESG claims. But ESG is environment, sustainability, and governance, right? So there are going to be things that are ESG related that are not necessarily related to climate tech. And there are going to be things in climate tech that may not meet the ESG criteria of a particular index or firm. Like a perfect example is if you're a big financial institution and you want to create an index of businesses that you invest in under an ESG banner, you're going to make sure that they meet certain criteria on their environmental footprint, that they are sustainable to some degree, and that they also govern internally in a way that meets your criteria. This could be, metrics on diversity. This could be metrics on board oversight or things like that. It's kind of broad, and so I think there is a sort of misnomer that ESG is like a well-known idea. I think it's actually very much up to the interpretation of the index creator, and I think over time we will normalize on some shared ideas. And we're already seeing some of that, but make no mistake, there's a place in this world for ESG, and I'd love to see more investment in it. I personally invest in ESG funds, but they are not necessarily climate tech. Climate tech is not necessarily ESG.
Okay, cool. So tell me about your specific areas where, I mean, you said you want to keep it broad as such as of now, but is there anything like for immediate future, maybe 2 years down the line, is it something very specific you are looking at?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the problems our founders face is access to basic ideas that are already commoditized outside of climate tech. So I think, once again, I think finance is really interesting, right? How do we create the right financial infrastructure such that a business like a climate tech business that has a huge capital expense up front, maybe it's laboratory rental space or access to farmland, things like that. How do we lower that cost of doing business? We think, and also how do we find the right revenue such that, given your type of business, the sort of financing that you would get is, matches your business. It scales with your business. Venture, for instance, the business we're in, is not appropriate for every type of climate business. In fact, this is why you see firms spinning up specifically to do project financing, which is a type of financing focused on individual efforts or short-term to medium-term projects in climate, right? And these could be like offset products that are trying to sell their carbon offsets. It could just be internal projects at corporations that are trying to lower their internal footprint. There's all sorts of reasons for building really CapEx intensive sort of projects that don't really necessitate venture capital. Yet when you look at what's required from our industry, I mean, it's a huge capital expense, right? Bill Gates, I think it was $4 trillion he said we need in infrastructure investment. And, the industry as it stands today is maybe 800 billion is what we're seeing committed towards towards climate tech and climate finance and infrastructure, and venture only represents about 30 billion of that. So we're very far away from where we need to be on a finance spectrum. So, those are the things that I think we're really, really interested in, is where are the huge gaps and what can we do to kind of chip away at them.
You're absolutely right, Jonathan. I mean, even the recent COP26 also had a problem with this investment, right? So the countries committed $100 billion. I don't think so even 20 or 30% of that money is channelized. So it is the case everywhere. I believe last year, overall $400 million got invested into climate technology solution, but still it is very low. And as you said, probably trillions of money is needed in the sector. So coming to you, how do you think that you would be able to mobilize the money which is needed for this sector?
Oh, well, I mean, I think my greatest strength is also my greatest weakness. I'm just incredibly, I guess, I assume I'm not unique, I guess is how I would describe it. And if I'm not unique, that means there are others out there like me, folks who've had success in tech and they want to see their impact grow. And we're already seeing this with a lot of our early limited partners, people coming in and supporting our business. They're not climate investors. They didn't wake up one day and decide like, oh, I'm going to be a climate investor. They've slowly been seeing the change in their planet. They may have kids. For me, that was a big motivator, having kids and saying like, what am I leaving you with, in 10, 20 years? So I feel a responsibility. And I noticed a lot of the folks who believe in our vision and join us early on. These are people who share that vision, that we have a responsibility to make an impact, but we are pragmatists at heart. We are ruthlessly pragmatic is actually how we describe ourselves. And we believe that the opportunities to innovate should not sacrifice the opportunities to be great investments as well. And so that, we think our particular thesis allows for both of those things to be true.
Awesome. Cool. All the best for that. So how do you have any target in mind? This much corpus you want to accumulate and then start investing?
Yeah, so it is a popular space, as you kind of noted early on. So the fund size itself that we're targeting is a $50 million fundraise. Right. It is a larger fund for first-time fund managers, but we are ambitious folks, and we believe strongly that this is the right mix of fund size and opportunity to allow us to go and make change in this world. So that's our target right now. We do have ways of supporting larger funds, but as it stands right now, that's sort of our focus in the short term.
Cool. And what kind of ticket size are you looking at in terms of investment? And have you spotted any opportunities thus far? Yeah,
so couple things. So in terms of investment, our minimum ticket is $500,000. We basically have that limit from the SEC. We have a limit on how many partners we can bring on. But I guess, the sort of second question you asked there, have I invested? Yeah, both Nate and I individually have invested in businesses. Some of them I can talk about, others I can't, but they're all going to be where you expect: food, ag, waste, infrastructure, finance.
Cool. So there are plenty of opportunities, and I'm sure there would be a lot of, not so good ones, right? There would be a lot of, just because everybody is in, I also want to start something in plant-based food, or I want to open a restaurant, or I also want to open a business around sustainable finance. So things like that also would be happening. So how would you spot the right opportunity, somebody who is really willing to take this problem heads on?
Yeah. So there are a lot of things we look at when it comes to business. We have a really great venture partner team that supports us on some of the core business metrics, core key indicators that anyone would look for in a successful business, right? We look at their balance sheet, we look at the debt and things like that. However, there are metrics that are unique to our thesis that we also look for. And specifically, this is going to pertain to platform businesses. So one of the first things we look for is the sector itself that the business is in. Like as a function or a percentage of global emissions, what is the contributing factor of this sector? We really are only interested in sectors that have at least a 1% global impact on CO2 equivalents. If they don't reach that threshold, it's an important sector perhaps, but not one that we're currently investing in. The second factor that we're interested in is the supply chain itself. We're going to look at the entire supply chain and the full life cycle analysis of the business's impact on that supply chain. And we're going to want to see a pretty strong change downwards in the carbon footprint of that supply chain as a result of the incorporation of this material. And then finally, there is, the simple reality that the business needs to scale quickly. And so what's great about platform businesses is they scale quickly, but they also, are few and far between. So we're going to be looking for indicators on those businesses that they can grow at a certain rate to meet the expectations of venture returns.
Cool. So do you also look at the founder's background or age of the startup, stuff like that? Or, that is just the standard?
Yeah, so we do, that is one of the sort of core diligences we do before our thesis. And team makeup, founder makeup are important to us. The reality is the space is so new that previous track record may not even be applicable. We do have a great track record of building teams though. So we know what the DNA of a great team looks like, and we are less interested that a first-time founder in climate tech has some, background in climate tech previous to that. In fact, arguably, there's some counter indicators that the previous, green tech boom might not be the best place to source your candidates from. But that said, there are still plenty of folks who came from that era that are very well equipped to start businesses. So we try to focus less on where you came from and more about where you're going. Yeah. What are your plans for growing your team, and how can we best make sure that your team is structured well for your growth?
Yeah, because why I was asking, because I'm personally seeing a lot of young people getting into this sector, right? People who are founding or getting into this sector are pretty young. 20s to 30s maybe, right? So they will not have experience like you have. So over there, they would need the VC to help them along in the journey. So that would be required. And many times, personally, I have seen the businesses which are into sustainability, they themselves are not very sustainable. So you probably need to help them in order to go ahead and get into profitability, right?
Yeah, VC certainly has a role to play in innovation, I think. I think that's been proven out many times in the software space. But I would be hesitant to say that VC is necessarily the only way that founders can reach their potential in climate tech. I would argue that, education, policy play equally important roles in the climate tech revolution and the ability for founders to be successful. Indeed, I had to go through a lot of education myself just to even start to feel comfortable in climate tech, and many years of involvement in sustainability and nonprofits helped. But even then, I still needed to do a lot of self-education. So there are easy problems in climate tech, things that people naturally gravitate towards, lifestyle change. I see a lot of lifestyle change businesses, for instance, like how can I have a more carbon conscious lifestyle? I think those are important problems to solve. I think they're also the first problems that people jump to. And there are many problems like that. I think what's harder is gaining a deeper insight into what is broken about our systems and go and finding your place to solve that problem. And what is your unique solution within our broken systems? In my opinion, that's where real change happens. And from there, if you have a good solution, the money will find you. I think that's pretty much been proven self-evident time and time again. Of course, having a great network and access will improve your chances, but nothing replaces a good idea. So that would be my encouragement: is get educated, understand the geography you work in, the political landscape, and find the opportunities in your systems to create a better opportunity for yourself, for founders, for your friends and family. Like, don't just focus on the surface level stuff, because I think there's some really interesting problems deeper down the stack.
My final 2-3 questions, Jonathan. So what is the geography you are focusing on? Is there anything specific, US only, or you are open to other geographies?
Any place that CO2 exists is a place we're going to look at. So like I mentioned, this is a system problem. It is a inappropriate focus to go geographical on a climate tech fund, in my opinion.
Yes,
we need
absolutely.
global solutions to a global problem.
Absolutely.
We think about it as a system, and we invest systemically.
So probably climate change is one problem which is across the globe. It is just not very specific to a country or a region, right? So we need to be broad. So thanks for that.
Not to like pick on Indonesia or something like that, right. But like, if every nation decides to stop producing CO2, but Indonesia keeps producing CO2, then indeed we'll end up in a situation where there's still an increase of CO2 entering the atmosphere. And there are many historical challenges with policy change, right? In fact, arguably the way we as developed nations became developed was through really unscalable carbon intensive processes. And it is in a very basic way unfair for younger countries to not have to be able to take that same path. So there is actually a burden on bigger countries that have gone through that change to support these sort of smaller economies to a greener future, so that they don't have to take the same path that the developed countries took. So make no mistake, I don't want to pick on any one country. I think every country is wrestling with this in their own way. But I do want to say that like it is a global problem, and we need to be thinking about it in a global way.
Yes, and we need more people like you to think in that way, in a more holistic way. So, and world would be a much better place. So, what was the idea behind the name Snocap?
Yeah, good question. So, it started with a really just funny naming exercise where we just were throwing out names and trying to see what emotionally resonated with people. We all really liked short names. So our management firm is called Snow Management, SNO. And so we just, figured what are the words, the suffixes we can add to snow to kind of represent our various theses for our fund. So our first fund we called Soncap. And really it's pretty uncreative. I think beyond that, we want to put a cap on how much carbon we put out into the world. And we do think platforms are a great way to do that. We toyed around with the idea of making CAP an acronym, but like climate action platforms or things like that. But I think at the end of the day, it's really just more of a emotional feeling we feel when we think about what is the spirit of the first fund and how do we make real systemic change.
Yeah, cool. Very nice name. So is the snow having any connection with the Arctic ice or the ice?
Part of the emotional resonance of snow is really, our ancient ice caps are melting, and it's a way to remind ourselves what we're doing this for. There's certainly a connection there, and yeah, I think in aggregate, it's really about stopping that from happening and doing it in a way that we think is meaningful.
Yes, absolutely. My final question, Jonathan, leave everything aside, what is your personal connection with nature and environment?
Well, so I grew up in a city. So I actually had almost no connection to nature when I was growing up. But I did have a very big connection to urban sprawls and to life in cities. And as I started to sort of juxtapose that against nature, I did start to get exposed to more and more camping trips and things like that as I got older. It did start to open my eyes into the ways that, it's easy to forget that all of these things are changing outside of our day-to-day lives. So my personal connection really came in the form of, I don't know, call it like a blissful, naive joy of being outside and of experiencing life in a certain way. And as you get older, everyone will experience things that, not always because of climate change, but sometimes just because of politics or war or whatever, your kids will likely not get the opportunity to experience. And as you start to grow an appreciation for that reality, other potential realities can resonate more. And so for me, the reality of climate change, while I have not experienced that change in a dramatic way, I have an easy time imagining how my children will experience it. And so for me personally, I would say that my connection with nature is really about one of allowing my kids to appreciate it the way I could. It's a sort of coming back to the idea of a responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. A wonderful thought. We are just a trustee for our future generation. So it is our responsibility. It is imperative on us to make sure that our future generations are able to enjoy the nature which we are leaving behind.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for your time. It was wonderful speaking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Great talking to you as well.